So, I didn't realize that Roz from Scallydandling About the Books was so anxious to channel her inner Frankenstein for October that her mission became to make me resurrect from the dead and turn me into a monster and return me to BookTube. So you can blame her for this. And as a side note, my blood pressure's fine. I'm not sunburned. I just had to rush from the shower to do this, or it wasn't going to get done, and thus I would break my promise to her to film this today. Now, she's managed to do this by tagging me in the most unediting necessary tag possible, which is honestly the best way to snag me. And that is in the reader habits tag. Now, these are a few questions which I have to the side of my monitor, so I will be glancing that way to fill them. And we're just going to jump in, but if you don't want to listen to the whole thing, I can give you the short version is it depends. The first question is, what is your favorite genre? And I read pretty much everything, and I really appreciate each genre for its own thing, but I definitely lean more towards fantasy, sci-fi, historical fiction. I don't know what to call it, but there are a few countries that I will read anything from there. Being Finland and Japan, I'm weird. I also read a lot of horror. I read nonfiction every month, at least one book, a play every month, and so on and so forth. I definitely have favorite things within subgenres, but we might get into more of that later. The second question is, what is the most difficult for you to read? And for me, that is, well, I don't know about difficult as in able to comprehend or capable of pondering over, even if I don't fully understand something. But I have the hardest time getting into any self-help book. And I've tried just to say I could with a genre, and it doesn't usually work out very well. Also, poetry, I have a very hard time unless I'm listening to it, because I can't find the same cadence. I can't connect with a poem as much if I'm just reading it. I've tried multiple times, and since I started picking up audiobooks, I've had a little more success, but it's not universal. Also, if it's a nonfiction book and it's very much more statistical, a list of names, because as much as I love history, I am terrible with names. Even like if you have a fantasy novel in any book, it does not matter. You could be named Bob, and I would forget that you are Bob. Moving on. I need my nonfiction to have a narrative flow or really put me into the context and feel of the place or the subject, or give me something more than just a blow by blow. I'm not here for the case brief. I'm here, for your whole argument. The next question is, what is your preferred age range? And I say give me all the age ranges, because much like I skip around genres, intended age ranges in books have different high points and low points. Middle grade, I go for there's more adventure, there's more fun, there's not the usually as much of or any romantic subplot, which in my opinion is, unless it is your focused genre, very poorly executed. In young adult, for one very almost obvious reason, if you're familiar with a genre at all, and in adult because I just don't really like how it's usually handled. It either goes to extreme one way or another, or is just a bad plot device. For young adult, actually, this gets too much love on one side of BookTube and then almost too much scorn from the other. And I say this because a young adult is not perfect. It has its flaws. It's very more heavy on its tropes, I would say, in some ways. But it was also one of the first sections of publishing that I found that really latched on to the whole own voices movement, or being more diverse. In fact, while they say, women authors have a harder time breaking into the industry in most of the general fiction categories, I would argue that it would be really hard to find more than, I'll even say a dozen, but I'm even cautious saying that, really well-known young adult male authors. And I think the genre could do with more male protagonists as well. So when I started getting back into reading and was looking for things from different cultures and perspectives, young adult really offered a great venue for that. There's also been an increasing movement within middle grade and young adult to emphasize family and friendships, not necessarily exclusive, and I really appreciate that. And honestly, I can go into literary grounds or classic grounds or anything of that sort and, appreciate it, love it, see its total significance and worth and value. But sometimes that easier, sometimes shorter read is just what you need to get through to the next. On to the next rant, speaking of. The next is, are you a character-driven or a plot-driven reader? Now, if either of these is really terrible, it's not going to matter if it's really strong in the other. But if I had to pick one of the two, I would pick a better character novel, because I think the things that you need to develop a character can sometimes make your narrative. Sometimes they are your narrative. So I would definitely lean heavier towards that, but I think you really kind of need both, at least to function on some level. Now the next is, do I have I'm actually going to combine these two, and it's preferred tense or preferred perspective, and really it's whatever fits your story the best. And that's the same for the next ones. Do you like a series or standalone long short books? It's whatever serves your narrative. And since I read so many different types of books, I'm not going to sit there and say that there's one best way for anything, because there are certain things that I can take in novellas that I can't in long fiction. In fact, I don't reach for a lot of contemporary, what I guess a lot of people would consider literary fiction, because I spend too much of my adult time dwelling a lot of issues that are addressed, or try to get to the heart of those books. But if it's a play or a novella, I'm all for it. So that really can matter. Same thing with tense. One thing I noticed, interestingly, that if I haven't done this in a while, but when I was writing more, if I was having a really hard time getting into a character, I'd switch tense. I know I'm going to confuse these if I do, but I think I went into first person if I was trying to figure out the character myself, and then I would go into second person if I was trying to figure out how one character would see another character. I don't think any of that really made its way into anything formal, but that's kind of a tool I used. So if you're trying to utilize your tense or your perspective, or even the length of your books, I think it'd be really strange, but I think we've come into a tendency of books getting longer as the series goes on. I think it'd be kind of fun to have a random short insert. Maybe that's why a lot of people are doing insert novellas these days. So whatever works for your story to make the story as you see fit. End of those three. Now, the next is, which format do you prefer best? Now, if we're talking physical books, there's nothing that's going to beat that really good, big, floppy paperback. They're maneuverable. You don't have to worry so much about the spine. They're easier to read. Usually there's a little larger print, unless you've got a whole, I can't imagine something like, any of the really big books. I'm Robert, Wheel of Time. Thank you, Cassie. What the Wheel of Time series big floppies would be like, I'm not even sure you could lift them. But, so big floppy paperback would be preferred physical. Digital, now, to be fair, I've never had access to a Kindle or something that was really suited for reading. But any sort of tablet device or screen device I've used, I haven't. It wears on my eyes. It's not very accessible for me. So ebooks are really not an option for me. However, a few years ago, I started listening to audiobooks, and I come from a family of very fast talkers. So not only can I speed things up and still comprehend, but I spend crazy amount of time in the kitchen or doing chores, and so I can throw one of those on, and really audiobooks are the only reason I'm able to read as much as I do, or would like to, I should say. And yes, I realize there's a difference between reading and listening, but my goal for reading is to take into a story that I'm going to enjoy. So for my purposes, while I really do love sitting down with a book, I'm okay with that. I've come to terms with this part of my reading life. It broke my heart. I said never ever, but I am living proof proof that this is not always right. Now, the last question is, what am I currently reading? And I am currently reading, getting ahead of Steve Donahue's reading of He Knew He Was Right by Anthony Trollope. And spoiler alert, not for the story, but I'm not really liking it all that much. I've enjoyed all the other Trollopes, but we'll see how that goes. After that, I'm doing one of the horror things for October. I think I have Fledgling lined up, and later this month I will be doing my yearly annual, I'm so excited even though I shouldn't be, reread of Dracula, which is one of my favorite novels of all time. Even though I'm really not a huge horror fan, I've made myself read it more lately, but I'm really excited about that. And the other parts of my month, I have a bunch of things that hold through my libraries, so that's going to dictate it a lot. And I would really love to jump into one read along, although I'm massively behind, that's been going on, which I will address in another video that I plan on doing some other night. So I don't know if this will get up this evening, and I want to thank Roz again for not giving up on me, and considering this is the third tag she's put me in and the only one I've fulfilled. Girl, you got patience. Thank you. I adore you. I will see you soon with a couple other things I have planned, but it is late. I'm not going to tag anyone because, one, I don't have that big of an outreach, and if you want to do it, go right ahead. It's all fun. Doodles!